Why does everything you achieve lose its shine so quickly? In this revealing exploration, we dive into Arthur Schopenhauer's ideas to understand why pleasure is always fleeting and how this constant pursuit of satisfaction might be undermining your inner peace. Through deep reflections and practical applications, you'll discover how to escape the cycle of desire, understand the role of boredom, and build a more authentic, serene, and mindful life. If you feel you're always chasing something that's never enough, this exploration is for you. Prepare to transform how you view pleasure, desire, and true emotional freedom. Like, comment, and subscribe for more videos that combine philosophy, clarity, and inner transformation. The illusion of pleasure. Why nothing ever satisfies you. Schopenhauer. Arthur Schopenhauer, a 19th century German philosopher, developed one of the most penetrating analyses of human desire and the nature of pleasure. His vision remains disturbingly relevant today in our era of digital consumerism and instant gratification. In his major work, The World as Will and Representation, he offers valuable tools for understanding why happiness always seems to elude us, despite all our achievements. 1. The promise of pleasure and the emptiness it leaves. Why does what we long for seem to lose its luster at the exact moment we attain it? Picture this scenario. After months of anticipation, the moment finally arrives to unwrap that object of desire, a new smartphone, a car, or perhaps the keys to your own home. The sensation is almost electric. A surge of excitement courses through your body. But after just a few weeks, that intense joy no longer exists. The extraordinary has become ordinary. The object of desire that occupied your thoughts for so long has transformed into just another item of daily life, barely noticed as you move through your routine. For Schopenhauer, this isn't a flaw in our personality or a sign of ingratitude. It's not that we're broken or incapable of appreciating what we have. Rather, it's the very nature of pleasure that is fundamentally illusory. According to his penetrating analysis, pleasure has no positive character of its own. It is merely the temporary cessation of the pain of unsatisfied desire. Like a pendulum, we constantly oscillate between the suffering of lack and the boredom of satisfaction, never finding a lasting point of equilibrium that could grant us permanent happiness. The philosopher teaches us that human will is insatiable by nature. Each satisfied desire immediately gives way to another, in a cycle that never truly ends. This is the great tragedy of existence. We are condemned to desire, but satisfied desire never brings us the definitive peace we secretly hope for. The momentary relief of obtaining what we want quickly fades, and we find ourselves back in the familiar state of wanting something else, something more, something different. However, recognizing this mechanism is not cause for despair. It's not a reason to give up on life or fall into nihilism. On the contrary, it's the first step toward a more conscious life. When we understand that pleasure is fleeting by its very nature, we stop placing unrealistic expectations on it. We begin to realize that conditioning our happiness on external achievements is building on quicksand. We can start to relate to our desires with more wisdom and less attachment. Liberation begins when we notice the pattern. How expectation often generates more enthusiasm than possession. How quickly we get used to what we have. How new desires arise almost immediately after old ones are satisfied. This awareness allows us to make wiser choices, less governed by the illusion of permanent pleasure. We can start to question our impulses rather than blindly following them, asking ourselves what truly matters in the greater context of our lives. Our culture constantly reinforces the idea that the next purchase, the next achievement, or the next relationship will finally make us complete. Advertisements exploit this fundamental mechanism of human psychology, promising that their product will be the one thing that finally satisfies us completely. But Schopenhauer's insight reveals the futility of this promise. The pleasure of acquisition is programmed to fade by the very structure of our psychology. Understanding this doesn't mean we should stop desiring altogether. That would be neither possible nor desirable for living beings. Rather, it means developing a more mature relationship with our desires, recognizing their ephemeral nature, and finding a deeper source of contentment that doesn't depend solely on their satisfaction. It means learning to enjoy the journey rather than fixating exclusively on the destination. 2. The cycle of will: desire, achievement, boredom. What reveals more about the human condition? Our moments of happiness or the periods of deep boredom we face even after achieving what we desire? Schopenhauer identified a relentless cycle that governs our lives. We intensely desire something, struggle to obtain it, feel momentary pleasure upon achieving it, quickly grow accustomed to it. Boredom emerges from this familiarity, and then we need a new desire to fill the void. This wheel never completely stops turning as long as we live. It's the fundamental rhythm of human existence, playing out in countless variations throughout our lives. The philosopher observed that we are trapped between two sufferings, that of unsatisfied lack and that of the boredom that arises after satisfaction. When we desire, we suffer from absence, from the pain of wanting what we don't have. When we obtain what we want, after a brief moment of pleasure, we suffer from the emptiness of satisfaction that doesn't sustain itself. It's as if we were a pendulum oscillating between pain and boredom, never finding a stable position of rest. We are forever caught in this pendular movement, pushed by forces greater than our conscious control. This cycle manifests clearly in the contemporary world, perhaps even more visibly than in Schopenhauer's time. In the digital age, the infinite scrolling on our smartphone screens perfectly exemplifies what Schopenhauer described. We constantly seek the next stimulus, the next novelty, the next dopamine peak. But each reward quickly empties itself of satisfaction, demanding another, in an endless spiral that leaves us simultaneously overstimulated and fundamentally unsatisfied. The technology that promises to connect us and fulfill our needs often leaves us more restless than before. In the professional environment, we experience the "what now" syndrome after reaching an important goal. The much-desired promotion, once obtained, quickly normalizes in our experience. The salary increase that seemed like it would transform our lives becomes our new baseline, no longer generating joy. And soon we're searching for the next rung on the corporate ladder, convinced that the next level will finally bring the satisfaction that this one failed to provide. The cycle continues, with each achievement becoming the new normal. In relationships, intense romantic love gives way to routine and familiarity. The person who once seemed to hold the key to our happiness becomes part of our everyday landscape. Many seek novelties, conflicts, or new partners to rekindle what has dimmed, not realizing that this too is part of the same cycle. The initial excitement was never meant to last, not because there's something wrong with the relationship, but because this is how human psychology functions. The capitalist economic system perfectly understands and exploits this mechanism. The planned and perceived obsolescence of products is a direct reflection of the cycle of will that Schopenhauer described. We always need the newest model, the updated version, the upgrade, not because what we have doesn't work, but because desire demands new objects. Our economy is built on the perpetual stoking of new wants, new needs, new desires, a perfect mirror of the will's insatiable nature. But the realism of this observation is not an invitation to fatalism or resignation. On the contrary, it's liberating. Recognizing the pattern is the first step to not being completely controlled by it. When we identify the cycle in action within ourselves, we gain critical distance from our own desires. We can then question, does this desire represent a real need, or is it just the next turn of the wheel? Will this purchase or achievement really transform my life, or am I simply following the programmed rhythm of desire and satisfaction? Schopenhauer teaches us to pause before each decision driven by desire. We learn to ask, will this object really bring lasting satisfaction, or just momentary relief that will soon demand another? This awareness allows us to make more informed choices, more aligned with sustainable well-being, and less subject to the whims of insatiable will. we can begin to discriminate between desires that might genuinely enhance our lives and those that merely perpetuate the cycle. This critical awareness doesn't mean rejecting all desires. Rather, it means engaging with them consciously, understanding their nature, and choosing which ones to pursue based on a deeper understanding of what truly contributes to our well-being. It means sometimes deliberately choosing delayed gratification over immediate satisfaction, or simplicity over acquisition. It means developing the wisdom to navigate the cycle rather than being blindly driven by it. 3. Possible happiness between self-mastery and simplicity. What if true happiness doesn't reside in the intensity of pleasure, but in the quality of our inner peace? Although Schopenhauer is known for his penetrating diagnosis of human suffering, his thinking doesn't end with mere recognition of the illusion of pleasure. He is not simply a philosopher of pessimism, as he's often characterized. In fact, he offers concrete paths to a fuller life, beyond the cycle of desire and frustration. His philosophy contains profound insights about how we might attain a more stable form of contentment, even in a world governed by insatiable will. The first path is aesthetic contemplation. The experience of beauty in art and nature provides moments of suspension of will. When we genuinely contemplate a work of art or a natural landscape, we temporarily cease wanting and desiring. We become, in the philosopher's words, pure subjects of knowledge, momentarily freed from the demands of will. In these precious moments, we step outside the cycle of desire and satisfaction, experiencing a rare form of will-less knowing that approximates peace. Music, in particular, was considered by Schopenhauer as the highest of arts, capable of directly expressing the essence of the world. Unlike other art forms that represent particular things, music expresses the will itself, without mediation. When we are deeply moved by music, we experience a direct connection to the fundamental reality that underlies appearances. This explains why music can stir us so profoundly, speaking directly to something essential within us that transcends our individual concerns. The second path is the ethics of compassion. Recognizing that we all share the same essence and the same suffering breaks the barriers of egoism. When we practice compassion, we momentarily transcend the limits of our ego and its endless desires. We recognize ourselves in others, understanding that their suffering is fundamentally no different from our own. This recognition connects us to something larger than our individual will, offering a respite from its constant demands. Helping others without expectation of reward generates a deeper and more lasting satisfaction than selfish pleasure. Acts of kindness and compassion create a different kind of contentment, one not based on the satisfaction of desire, but on the momentary transcendence of the self-centered will. This isn't mere sentimentality. It's a practical path to a more fulfilling way of being in the world, grounded in the recognition of our shared essence. The third path is the conscious moderation of desires. It's not about denying life or practicing extreme asceticism, but understanding that the less we desire, the less we suffer. Voluntary simplicity is a form of wisdom that reduces the gap between what we want and what we have. Living with what's necessary, establishing clear limits of satisfaction, and cultivating the ability to appreciate what one already has are practices that promote more stable happiness. In an age of aggressive consumerism and constant stimulation, this message is more relevant than ever. We're surrounded by messages that tell us to want more, to need more, to consume more. Schopenhauer's philosophy offers a powerful counterbalance, suggesting that happiness might lie in the opposite direction. Not in multiplying desires, but in moderating them. Not in expanding wants, but in finding contentment with less. Schopenhauer teaches us that self-mastery is the key to a less turbulent life. By recognizing the nature of the will that inhabits us, we can establish a more conscious relationship with it. We are not obliged to respond to every impulse that arises within us. We can observe our desires, question them, and choose those that are truly worthwhile. This doesn't mean suppressing our nature, but working with it more skillfully, with greater awareness and discrimination. True freedom, according to the philosopher, doesn't consist in doing everything one wants, but in not being a slave to one's own desires. The free person is one who determines for themselves what deserves to be desired, not one who simply obeys every whim of the will. This is a profound redefinition of freedom that challenges our conventional understanding. Freedom isn't the absence of constraints or the ability to satisfy every impulse. It's the capacity to relate to our own desires with discernment and wisdom. Ultimately, possible happiness lies less in the frantic pursuit of pleasure and more in achieving a state of serenity and contentment. It's found in the ability to find meaning even in the face of the inevitable dissatisfaction of will. It's in building a life worth living not for the peaks of pleasure it provides, but for the inner peace it allows us to cultivate. This isn't a resignation to unhappiness, but a more mature and sustainable approach to well-being. Most of our pains come from the distance between what we expect and what we find. This insight from Schopenhauer remains profoundly relevant in our days. Understanding the mechanics of desire isn't just a philosophical exercise, it's a practical tool for living with more lucidity and less unnecessary suffering. When we align our expectations more closely with reality, we reduce a major source of disappointment and frustration. The illusion of pleasure will continue to exert its influence as long as we are human. We cannot completely escape the cycle of will. That would mean escaping our own nature. But we can learn to navigate it with more wisdom, more self-knowledge, more compassion for ourselves and others. We can develop a more conscious relationship with our desires, neither suppressing them completely nor blindly following their every dictate. This approach doesn't promise perpetual bliss or the complete elimination of suffering. Schopenhauer was too clear-sighted for such fantasies. What it offers instead is a more grounded, more sustainable form of contentment, one based not on the intensity of pleasurable experiences, but on the cultivation of inner peace and the reduction of unnecessary suffering. It's about finding a way to live well within the conditions of human existence, rather than constantly fighting against them. Ask yourself today, which desire do I recognize as a possible trap in my personal cycle? What practice of self-mastery or simplicity can I incorporate into my daily life? How can I build a more lucid relationship with my own desires? These questions aren't simply theoretical exercises. They're practical tools for applying Schopenhauer's insights to your own life, for moving beyond the endless cycle of desire and disappointment towards something more stable and fulfilling. Schopenhauer's philosophy invites us not to pessimism, but to a superior form of realism, a realism that, paradoxically, opens the way to more authentic freedom and more genuine joy. A joy that is born not from the satisfaction of every desire, but from the ability to live well, even when not all desires can or should be satisfied. This is perhaps his most valuable legacy, not the diagnosis of suffering, but the pathways he illuminates beyond it. In our hyper-connected, hyper-stimulated world, where new desires are constantly being manufactured and marketed to us, Schopenhauer's message is more relevant than ever. His philosophy offers a counterbalance to the excesses of consumer culture, reminding us that more isn't always better, that pleasure isn't the same as happiness, that the key to a good life might lie not in what we acquire, but in how we relate to our own wanting. So the next time you feel that familiar urge for something new, that conviction that the next purchase or achievement will finally make you complete, pause. Remember Schopenhauer's insight about the nature of desire and satisfaction. Ask yourself if this particular want is leading you toward genuine fulfillment or simply setting you up for the next turn of the wheel. In that moment of awareness, you've already begun to practice the kind of philosophical wisdom that transcends mere theory and becomes a way of life. Do you experience the illusion of pleasure? Tell us about it. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe to the channel. Until the next video.